Okay, so hi. Today we're going to talk about evolution. So, evolution is the process by which things change over time, and in a biological context, this refers to how organisms change over many generations. So, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Um, Second. Okay, so Charles Darwin, is it sharing? Yeah. So Charles Darwin essentially was the first person to propose this theory of evolution. And evolution has five core principles or tenets. So number one is that populations change over time. So we see evolution occurring. Number two is that this change occurs gradually over over millions of years. So a lot of people think that you know, evolution might occur in an organism's lifetime or over like one or two generations, but that's not how it works. We'll get more into that later. And three, speciation occurs. So this is when one species splits into two or more species, and this occurs when the evolutionary pressures for two different populations of the same species are different. To say one is living in a so say they're both living in the same environment and then something happens, some, I don't know, maybe like a tsunami or anything like that, that happens and it changes what the two different populations experience. So one population might now be in a hotter environment while the other might be in a colder environment. And over, hundreds, thousands of years, these different environmental pressures make it so they evolve different traits, um, which eventually lead to two different species. So the fourth tenet is that all species share a common ancestry. So what this says is that every organism, humans, monkeys, dogs, even plants and fungi, they all share a common ancestry. Um, so even us and bacteria and single-celled organisms, all, if you go back far enough, we all share a common ancestor. And the last tenet is that evolution or adaptation is caused by this process that Darwin called natural selection. So natural selection is it's the main thing of evolution, essentially. And we'll go into that now. So yeah, any questions about these five tenets? Um, these are these we'll go back to these a lot during this session. Okay, so let's go into natural selection now. Where is it? Okay, so yeah, natural selection in its time was this big thing because essentially back then um, a lot of people were very religious and they didn't want to accept evolution because that means that we're derived from monkeys and no one wanted to think that. But anyway, that's not really too important. So natural selection um, can be summarized by Darwin's four postulates. So firstly, individuals within a population differ from each other. So take humans for example. Um, People in New Zealand and well, even just take people in New Zealand, you and your friend were the same species, but you look different from each other. It's as simple as that. Um, Number two, these differences are at least in part passed from parents to offspring. So you and your parents will give some of their traits to you, and that's why you and your siblings might look similar or have similar preferences. Um, of course, some of that's not. Um, heritable. It's more like, that you grew up watching the same shows and playing the same sport. But that's something else entirely. But yeah, so these differences are passed from parent to offspring, and back then when Darwin proposed this, he didn't know about DNA. But later on, when we discovered DNA in genes, this is the mechanism by which these differences are passed on through our genes. Um, so yeah, number three, some individuals are more successful at surviving and reproducing than others. So, and number four, these successful individuals are not merely lucky, instead they succeed because of these traits they've inherited, and that they will pass on to their offspring. So essentially, what's a good example? Um, imagine imagine you're a bird and you're a guy, and the females like bright displays of your feathers are bright, and so the males that have brighter displays will the females will be more attracted to them, and so and so yeah so as a male it's advantageous to have a brighter display. Of course, there's a thing of if you have a brighter display, then you'll be um, more easily spotted by predators, and therefore it's more risky. But that's sexual selection. We might go into that later. But anyway, and so yeah, and so when the male and the female mate, their offspring will also have the brighter feathers, and yeah, it's just a cycle that keeps on going to the next generation and so on. Yeah. So now that we've explained that, let's get into an actual example. So let me just share a different screen. Um, there we go. Okay. So you might have already heard of this one. So Darwin's finches is probably like the most famous example of evolution. So Darwin on his expedition went to these islands called the Galapagos Islands, where he observed these birds called finches, and he observed that on the different islands, these finches look different. You've got um, and these differences depended on what the finches ate. So you can see this one on the top right has a thick beak because it or this one in the middle had a thick beak because it was munching on seeds, whereas this orange one here munched on insects, and you didn't need such a strong beak for that. So yeah, beak size depended on their diet. And so now let's connect that to Darwin's four postulates. So number one, the first postulate is that um, individuals in a population differ from each other. So, sorry. So you can see that here. So this was actually an experiment in 2002 by Grant and Grant, and they measured these finches on an island. They measured 751, and they measured their beak depth, and you can see the beak depth differs quite a lot within the same species. So that's the first postulate. Um, yeah, and then so the second postulate is that I think it's that changes over time. Oh yeah, so that these differences are at least in part passed from parents to offspring. So they measured the beak depth in 1976 and also in 1978. So we can infer from this that essentially the beak depth correlates between the two generations, and so we can we can infer that postulate 2 is sound. And yeah, so in this third one, it might be kind of hard to see, but oh, so I haven't. Sorry, let me just go back. Before we continue, yeah, just if you ever have any questions, just feel free to interrupt me. But yeah, okay, it kind of glitches out when I zoom in, but so yeah, you can see from this first graph that so the number of finches over a period of time actually decreased substantially, and this was correlated with the abundance of seeds. So, you know, the amount of food decreased, and therefore there wasn't enough food for all of the finches, and therefore the finch population decreased. And so what's this one? Oh yeah, and you can see that the characteristics of the seed was changing over that period as well. So it started off small and soft, got large and hard, and then went back to small and soft again. And yeah, and you know, that's just saying that when the sorry, when the shape of the seed changes over time, then the finches have to adapt to that. So yeah, so that essentially affirms postulate 3 that some individuals are more successful at surviving and reproducing than others. Um, but yeah, next, and yeah, so this is probably the most important slide here. So you can see in 1976, this was in the first slide we saw. Um, so they measured the big depth in 1976, and then in 1978, they measured it again from the next generation. And you can see that the average big depth has increased from, what is it here, like 9.4 to just over 10 millimeters. And that's great. That's natural selection in action. Um, and you know, this change in beak depth was passed on from parents to offspring because the parents who had the thicker beak were more likely to survive and therefore were more likely to reproduce and pass on the thick beak to the next generation. Um, yeah, and that's essentially it. So do you have any questions about this example? Yeah, well, for the next one, I'll get you to you know, do a bit of thinking yourself before I explain it. Um, so I know for NCEA level 3, there's a paper called I think it's human evolution. So we're gonna go into one of the questions from there, and yeah, let's get on to it. Oh, actually, before we do that, I'll just go into another example. So let's look at the peppered moths. Um, so originally these peppered moths look um, look like this picture here, like kind of white and black peppered. Um, but after the Industrial Revolution, um, the phenotype, so essentially there were more of these black variants. The population of these black variants increased. So these two are actually the same species, but they're different phenotypes, which just means they look different, but they're still the same species. And this was because, yeah, this is here, industrialization and domestic coal fires had caused sooty air pollution, which killed off lichens and blackened tree trunks and walls. And so, yeah, why would you think that the population of the black variant increased during this time? Okay, yeah, correct. So these black moths could now blend into the environment more, and predators would have a harder time finding them, whereas these white ones would now stand out amongst the darkened environment, and predators were found it easier to see them and eat them. Um, yeah, yeah, that's just one example. Um, but there's heaps of examples of stuff like this happening. Um, so if you want more, I can send through some, or you can even just search it up online. Um, yeah, these examples I'm showing you are stuff I learned at school. So you probably might have seen some of it, or you might see it in the future. Okay, so yeah, let's now go on to a question from so this is a question from the 2015 NCEA Level 3 Biological Evolution paper. Um, So yeah, let's get started. So a distinguishing feature of hominins is habitual bipedalism. Comparisons of skeletal features of modern humans and extant living hominids, such as the gorilla or chimpanzee, reveal several key features that are associated with the transition from quadrupedal species to bipedal species. And yeah, so these are some of the changes from chimpanzees to modern humans. So you can see this is the skull, then the pelvis, the leg bones, and the whole structure here. So discuss the importance of bipedalism in the development of hominins by linking the skeletal features to their adaptive significance. So firstly, do you know what is meant by the terms quadruped and biped? Yeah, correct. So quadrupeds walk on four legs, like dogs, and bipeds walk on two legs, like humans. Um, Explain how any three of the skeletal features shown above provide evidence for the form of locomotion changing to bipedalism. So, so yeah, we could talk about any of these here. So let's start with the well, first of all, do you have any ideas about any of these? No, that's okay. We'll go through each of them. Um, so let's start off with the skull. So you see this hole here. This is called the foramen magnum, and this is what connects the skull to the spinal cord. Um, so you can see in humans that we're bipedal, so the skull is, sorry, not the skull, the spinal cord is vertical, and it connects to the foramen magnum around here. And the foramen magnum in humans is central. So if humans had the foramen magnum at the back of their skull, like chimpanzees do, then our heads would be like supported at the back rather than the middle, and that would we would like be leaning forward like that, and that wouldn't be very comfortable. So yeah, gradually over time, the position of the foramen magnum moved more central to support our heads when walking and standing. Um, yeah, so does that make sense? Um, Next, we'll move on to the pelvis. So you can see, compared to the chimpanzee pelvis, the human one is more broad and like bowl shaped, and this supports, it allows for better weight distribution and stability, essentially. Um, yeah, we can go into that more if later if you want. Um, Moving on to the femur, so you can see in gorilla, um, so this vagus angle here, in the knee is like not much in the gorilla, but more in the human. And this is to support walking and running, as this high angle allows for more yeah, essentially more efficient walking and running. If you want to know how this works, we can get into that as well. But yeah, um, yeah. So that's the second point. Um, Thirdly, justify why bipedalism was so significant to the evolution of hominins. So, okay, what do you think? So, if we transition from having all four of our limbs to the ground, from having two on the ground and two in the air, what does that mean? What what can we now do that we couldn't previously? Yep, yep. So yeah, it frees up our arms and our hands to do anything, to use tools, to you know, grab food from trees, to yeah, just do stuff with our hands. Of course, if you're a quadruped like gorillas, they still can use their arms to like grab food and stuff, but not as well as humans. And if you look at, dogs, then essentially they have four legs and they can't even like grab stuff with their arms, really. Somewhat, but not really. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much it. Um, yeah, so I think we'll leave it there. If you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, stop sharing the screen. Yeah, thanks and see you next time.